The night sky above. New Cascadia burned orange as the alien ships descended through the clouds. Commander Vraxthil stood at the bridge of his raiding vessel and watched the small human colony grow larger on his viewing screen, his 8 limbs clicking against the metal floor in anticipation of the hunt that was about to begin. The Kethrani had been doing this for thousands of years, and they had never failed, never been stopped, never faced any real resistance from the weak species that scattered across the galaxy like insects waiting to be crushed. His species stood nearly 3 meters tall, with armored skin that could stop most weapons and claws that could tear through steel. And they had earned their reputation as the most feared predators in known space. Tonight would be just another raid. Just another collection of slaves and resources from a species too soft and too slow to fight back. The colony of New Cascadia was home to only 12,000 humans. A small farming settlement on the edge of human space with minimal defenses and no military presence worth mentioning. Vrax Thol had chosen it specifically because it would be easy. His raiders dropped from the sky like falling stars, and the humans below scrambled in panic as the Kethrani hunters poured out of their ships with weapons raised and hunger in their eyes. Colonel David Chun was sleeping when the first explosion shook his home and threw him from his bed onto the hard floor. He was a retired military officer who had moved to this quiet colony to raise his daughter away from the dangers of the core worlds. And now those dangers had found him anyway. His wife had died 3 years ago from a sickness that even the best human medicine could not cure. And since then, it had been just him and Maya against the universe. Maya was 7 years old with dark hair like her mother and a smile that could light up the darkest room. And she was the only thing in the galaxy that mattered to David Chun. He grabbed his old service pistol from the drawer beside his bed and ran to her room, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. She was already awake and crying, her small body trembling under her blankets as the sounds of screaming and gunfire echoed through the settlement. Outside, David scooped her up in his arms and held her tight against his chest as he moved toward the back door of their home. He needed to get her to the emergency shelter on the other side of town where she would be safe until help arrived. But help was not coming fast enough. The Kethrani were everywhere, their massive forms moving through the streets like shadows made solid, grabbing humans and dragging them toward the waiting transport ships. David saw his neighbor try to fight back with a hunting rifle and watched as a Kethrani warrior simply walked through the bullets and tore the man apart with a single swipe of its claws. He pressed Maya's face against his shoulder so she would not see. They were almost to the shelter when the Kethrani found them. 3 hunters emerged from the darkness ahead, blocking the path, their red eyes glowing in the firelight as they spotted David and his daughter. He raised his pistol and fired, emptying the entire magazine into the nearest hunter. But the creature barely slowed down as the bullets bounced off its armored hide. The Kethrani moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. And before David could react, one of them struck him across the head with enough force to send him flying into a wall. He hit the ground hard and felt something crack in his ribs as his vision blurred, and darkness crept in at the edges. The last thing he heard before unconsciousness took him was Maya screaming for her daddy. When David woke up, the sun was rising over a ruined colony. Bodies lay in the streets, and buildings still burned with fires that no one was left to put out. And the alien ships were gone, vanished into the sky along with everyone they had taken. He stumbled through the wreckage calling Maya's name until his throat was raw and his voice was nothing but a broken whisper. She was gone. They had taken her. They had taken his little girl. David fell to his knees in the middle of the street, and something inside him broke. Something that had been holding back a darkness he had carried since his days in the military. A cold and terrible thing that he had buried deep and promised himself he would never let out again, but promises meant nothing now. His daughter was in the hands of monsters, and there was nothing in the universe that would stop him from getting her back. He found a working communication terminal in what remained of the colony's administrative building and began sending messages, not to the military command, who would take weeks to respond with committees and procedures, not to the politicians who would debate and negotiate while his daughter suffered. He sent his messages to the fathers, to the people who would actually do something, veterans he had served with, who had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer and survived, mercenaries who operated in the spaces between laws, smugglers and pirates, and soldiers of fortune who owed him favors from the old days. His message was simple and direct, with coordinates showing the trajectory of the Kathrani ships before they jumped to hyperspace, the name of the clan responsible for the raid, and a single image of Maya smiling on her 6th birthday. He did not ask for help. He did not offer payment. Simply told them what had happened and trusted that they would understand, because humans always understood. When it came to children, Commander Vraxthor returned to Kathrani space with his cargo hold full of new slaves and filed his raid report with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The humans from New Cascadia would be sorted and sold at the flesh markets, where the young and healthy would fetch good prices and the old and weak would be disposed of. He noted the small human child in his manifest, a female of approximately 7 years who had cried for her father until one of his warriors had silenced her with a blow that left her unconscious. She would make a good pet for some wealthy Kathrani noble, or perhaps a servant if she could be trained properly. Vraxthor thought nothing more about it as he handed over his captives and collected his payment. He had no way of knowing that he had just made the worst mistake in the entire history of his species. He had no way of knowing that across the galaxy, humans were receiving a message with a little girl's picture, and something ancient and terrible was waking up inside them. He had no way of knowing that he had not captured prey. He had kicked a hornet's nest, and the swarm was coming. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo had been retired for 7 years when the message arrived on her personal terminal. She was 63 years old with gray hair and a bad knee that had never healed properly. After a battle she preferred not to remember, and she had spent her retirement years tending a small garden on a quiet moon far from the noise of human civilization. The message contained coordinates and a trajectory, and a picture of a little girl with dark hair and a smile that reminded Sarah of her own granddaughter. She read the brief text that accompanied it and felt something stir in her chest, something she had not felt since her days commanding battleships against enemies who thought humans were easy targets. Within an hour she was on a transport heading to the orbital shipyard where her old vessel, the Relentless, sat in mothballs waiting to be scrapped. She made 3 calls on the way, and by the time she arrived, there were already 40 of her former crew members waiting for her. People who had dropped everything the moment they heard what had happened. They asked no questions and demanded no explanations, because none were needed. A child had been taken, and that was enough. Across human space, the same scene played out thousands of times as the message spread through networks that existed outside official channels, through groups of veterans who stayed in touch, through families who had lost their own children to alien raiders and understood the pain in ways that words could never capture. Marcus Webb was a cargo hauler who made his living moving goods between the outer colonies. A simple man with a simple life who had never fired a weapon in anger, but his sister had been taken by slavers 15 years ago, and he still woke up some nights hearing her scream for help in his dreams. He changed course the moment he received the message and began heading toward the coordinates And when he passed other human ships going the same direction, he felt no surprise at all. The Chum brothers ran what they called a salvage operation in the lawless sectors near the Galactic Rim. Though everyone knew their real business involved things that governments preferred not to discuss, they had 3 ships between them, each one armed with enough firepower to challenge a small warship. And they brought all 3 when they answered the call. Dr. Elizabeth Park was a trauma surgeon at one of the largest hospitals in human space. A woman who had dedicated her life to healing rather than hurting. 20 years ago, her daughter had been killed by pirates during a raid on a passenger liner. And Elizabeth had spent every day since then trying to save other people's children because she could not save her own. She took a leave of absence from the hospital without explaining why and chartered transport to join whatever was forming out there in the darkness between stars. She was not a soldier, but she knew how to keep soldiers alive long enough to finish what they started. The Galactic Council observed these movements with growing concern and confusion. Ambassador Zilveth of the Moravian Collective was the first to request an explanation from Earth's representative, a calm and professional woman named Ambassador Catherine Shaw. The meeting took place in a private chamber away from the other delegates because Zilveth sensed that this was not a matter for public discussion. We have detected thousands of human vessels converging on Kathrani space, Zilveth said, his 4 eyes blinking in the pattern that indicated concern among his species. This appears to be a military mobilization, but we have received no formal declaration of war, no diplomatic communications, nothing through proper channels. Ambassador Shaw nodded slowly, and her expression was difficult to read. That is because this is not a government action, she replied. Then what is it? The Kathrani raided a human colony 3 days ago and took captives, including a 7-year-old child. Zilveth waited for more, but Shaw said nothing else, as if that single statement explained everything. Raids happen, Zilveth said carefully. The Kathrani have been conducting such operations for centuries. It is simply their way, unpleasant but accepted, not by us. But surely the proper response is diplomatic protest. Perhaps economic sanctions? A formal complaint to the council. Shaw smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You do not understand, she said quietly. None of you have ever understood. When you look at humans, you see a young species, friendly and cooperative, good trading partners and reliable allies. You see a people who prefer negotiation to violence and who have never started a war of aggression. Yes, this is the human reputation, and all of that is true. But it is not the complete picture. Shaw leaned forward, and Zilveth felt something in the room change. Something in the air that made his survival instincts start screaming warnings he could not quite interpret. Humans evolved on a death world, Ambassador. Our planet tried to kill us every single day with predators and diseases and natural disasters that would have wiped out most species before they ever achieved sentience. Many species have difficult homeworlds, not like Earth. We did not become the dominant species on our planet because we were the strongest or the fastest. We became dominant because we learned to cooperate in ways that transcended individual survival. When one of us was threatened, all of us responded. And we never stopped until the threat was eliminated. This sounds like a description of pack behavior. Many predator species share this trait. It is more than pack behavior, Shaw said. It is something deeper. Something we carried with us from the caves where we huddled together against the darkness. Something we cannot control, even if we wanted to. And what is that? Shaw looked at Zilveth with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than her face. When you take a human child, you do not just hurt the parents. You hurt every human who hears about it. You trigger something primal in us, something that bypasses all our civilization and diplomacy and reaches Straight back to when we were prey hiding from predators in the night. What happens then? Then every single one of us becomes the same thing. We become parents whose child has been taken. And we do not negotiate, we do not sanction. We do not file complaints. Shaw stood up and straightened her formal robes. We come for our children. Ambassador, and God help anyone who stands in our way. Zilveth watched her leave and felt a chill run through his body. That had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. He had served as a diplomat for 40 years and had met hundreds of species from across the galaxy. Predators and prey, conquerors and pacifists. Beings of every conceivable type and temperament, but he had never before looked into the temperament eyes of a human who was protecting a child, and now he understood why no one had ever successfully held a human captive for long. The ships kept coming from every corner of human space. They came civilian vessels and retired warships, merchant freighters with weapons bolted to their hulls, mining ships whose industrial lasers could cut through armor as easily as they cut through rock. No one gave orders because no orders were needed. They all knew where they were going, and they all knew why. Colonel David Chun stood on the bridge of a commandeered transport ship and watched the fleet growing around him. Hundreds of vessels becoming thousands as more arrived. Every hour he had not slept since Maya was taken, and he did not plan to sleep until he held her in his arms again. A communication came through from Admiral Okonkwo on the Relentless, asking if he wanted to coordinate their approach to Kethrani space. He declined because there was nothing to coordinate. They were not an army following a battle plan. They were a tide following gravity, inevitable and unstoppable. And the Kethrani had no idea what was coming for them. Commander Vraxthol received the first report of trouble exactly 12 days after his raid on New Cascadia supply convoy heading to the outer colonies had failed to arrive, and when scouts were sent to investigate, they found only debris floating in the void where the ships should have been. He dismissed it as pirates, perhaps rival clans looking to steal resources. Nothing unusual in the contested regions of space. Then, the second convoy disappeared, and the third. Within a week, the Kethrani supply network was in chaos as ship after ship vanished without sending distress signals, without fighting back, without any warning at all. Vraxthil ordered increased patrols and armed escorts for all cargo vessels. Certain that this would solve the problem, it did not solve the problem. The attacks continued. But now they were not limited to supply ships. Outposts on the border of Kethrani space went dark one by one, their communication systems cutting off mid-transmission. Their crews never heard from again. When Vraxthil finally sent a warship to investigate the nearest silent outpost, they found it completely destroyed. Its defensive weapons melted into slag, its walls breached in dozens of places, and written on the largest remaining wall in letters 3 meters tall was a single word in the human language: Kilmingvrax. Dole felt something he had never felt before in his long career as a hunter, and it took him several moments to recognize it as fear. He ordered his fleet to defensive positions around the core Kethrani worlds and waited for the enemy to show themselves. He did not have to wait long. The human ships appeared on long-range sensors like a swarm of insects, emerging from the darkness. Thousands of contacts spreading across the border in a wave that seemed to have no end. Vraxthol studied the sensor data and felt his confusion grow because these were not military vessels, not warships built for battle. They were civilian craft of every size and type with weapons that appeared to be improvised or retrofitted rather than purpose-built. What is this? He asked his tactical officer. Where is their navy, their fleet command, their battle formations? The officer had no answer because there was no answer that made sense. The humans attacked without coordination, without strategy, without any of the military discipline that defined proper warfare. They simply came and they did not stop the first. Engagement was supposed to be a simple matter of the Kethrani fleet destroying the weaker human vessels before they could reach the core worlds. But nothing about this war would prove to be simple. The humans fought like nothing the Kethrani had ever encountered. They rammed their ships into Kethrani vessels with no regard for their own survival, detonating their reactors at point-blank range and taking enemy ships with them into oblivion. They launched boarding actions against ships 10 times their size, cutting through holes with mining equipment and fighting claw-to-hand in corridors too. Cramped for the Kethrani's size advantage, they took losses that would have broken any other species and kept coming, filling the gaps in their line with new ships that arrived every hour from human space. A Kethrani cruiser managed to capture one of the human boarding parties alive, and Vraxthil ordered the prisoners brought to him for interrogation. The human who stood before him was female, middle-aged, with burns covering half her face and blood dripping from wounds that would have incapacitated a Kethrani warrior, but she stood straight and looked at Vraxthil without fear. "I am Commander Vraxthil of the Kethrani Hunter Fleet," he said. "You will tell me your military strategy, your command structure, your fleet strength and disposition." The human laughed, and it was not the laugh of someone who was afraid. "Command structure?" she said. "Brother, nobody is in charge here. There is no strategy, no fleet command, no orders. That is impossible. No military force can operate without leadership. We are not a military force." Vraxthil leaned closer, his red eyes studying this strange creature who should have been trembling, but instead seemed almost amused. "Then what are you?" "We are parents," she said. "We are siblings and aunts and uncles and grandparents. We are humans who heard that a child was taken, and we came. This is madness. You are throwing away your lives by the thousands. Maybe. But you have one of our kids. One child. You are destroying yourselves over one child." The human smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Vraxthil step back without meaning to. "You really do not understand us at all, do you?" she said. "Every human child is our child. Every human in danger is our family. We do not count the cost because there is no cost too high. You will lose this war, perhaps. But even if we lose, we will hurt you so badly that no one will ever forget what happens when you touch our children. Every species in the galaxy will know that humans are not prey. And the next time someone thinks about raiding our colonies, they will remember this moment and choose differently." She paused, and the smile faded into something harder and colder. "But we are not going to lose." Vraxthil ordered her executed, but her words stayed with him long after she was gone. War continued, and the Kethrani continued to win individual battles, but somehow they were losing ground, falling back step by step as the endless tide of human ships pushed deeper into their territory. For every human vessel they destroyed, 2 more appeared to take its place. Crews of humans who had crossed the galaxy to fight and die for a little. Though they had never met Vraxthil, received reports from his intelligence officers that human businesses were shutting down across the galaxy as workers abandoned their jobs. That human colonies were going dark as entire populations loaded onto ships and headed for Kethrani space. That even humans living among other species were leaving their homes and joining. The swarm. It was not an invasion, it was a migration. An entire species moving as one with a single purpose burning in their hearts. The Kethrani had been apex predators. For 6,000 years, they had conquered dozens of species and destroyed any who resisted. That they had never faced anything like this. They had never faced a species that did not care about winning or losing, that did not care about survival, that cared only about one thing: getting their child back. And for the first time in 6,000 years, the hunters became the hunted. Vrax Thol looked at the tactical display showing his fleet falling back toward the homeworld, and realized that he was watching the end of everything. His people had built all because he had taken one small human child all because he had not understood what humans were willing to do for their own. The Kethrani homeworld had never been attacked in 6,000 years of recorded history. There, cities had been built for beauty and intimidation rather than defense, with tall spires reaching toward the sky and open plazas where warriors could gather to celebrate their conquest. There were no bunkers because the Kethrani had never needed bunkers. There were no evacuation plans because no enemy had ever come close enough to threaten their world. All of that changed when the human fleet arrived. Colonel David Chun stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the planet grow larger on the view screen. A blue and green world not so different from Earth, home to billions of the creatures who had taken his daughter. He had not slept in 19 days. His eyes were red and sunken, and his hands shook slightly from exhaustion, but none of that mattered because Maya was down there somewhere and nothing in the universe was going to stop him from reaching her. Admiral Okonkwo's voice came through the communication system asking for a moment of his attention. Colonel Chun, we have located the holding facility where the captives from New Cascadia are being kept. It is in the capital city about 30 kilometers from the main spaceport. Then that is where we go. The Kethrani fleet is regrouping between us and the planet. They still have significant firepower. I do not care, Colonel. If we try to push through their defensive line, we will lose thousands more ships. David turned away from the view screen and looked at the faces of the people around him on the bridge. Volunteers who had come from across the galaxy. Strangers who had become family over the past 19 days of fighting. I know, he said, and I know that many of you will not survive what comes next. I cannot order you to follow me because I have no authority to give orders. But I am going to that planet and I am going to get my daughter. Anyone who wishes to turn back now has my blessing and my thanks for everything you have already done. No one moved, no one spoke. They just looked at him with eyes that held the same fire that burned in his own heart. A voice came through from another ship. One of the Chun brothers, whose name was Marcus. Colonel, my brothers and I have been doing some calculations. If we take our ships in first and hit their defensive line at full speed, we can open a gap big enough for the landing craft to get through. Your ships will be destroyed, probably. But my sister was taken by slavers when we were young, and I never got the chance to save her. I would have given anything for that chance. I am giving it to you now. Another voice joined in, then another. Captains of ships large and small volunteering to be the first wave, to spend their lives buying time for the rescue teams to reach the surface. David felt tears running down his face, but he did not wipe them away. Thank you, he said. Thank you all. The attack began at dawn on the Kethrani homeworld. The first wave of human ships hit the defensive line like a hammer striking glass, ramming and exploding and dying by the dozens while the Kethrani fleet scrambled to respond. The gap opened just as Marcus had predicted, and the landing craft poured through. Hundreds of small ships carrying thousands of humans armed with whatever weapons they could find. David was on the first dropship to hit the atmosphere. Capital City spread out below them as they descended. Beautiful towers and sprawling structures that would have been impressive if David had any capacity left to appreciate beauty. All he could see was the holding facility on the edge of the city. A massive fortress where his daughter was waiting. The dropship took fire from ground defenses, and the pilot cursed as she fought to keep them in the air. Weaving between energy blasts that lit up the sky like lightning, they hit the ground hard about 2 kilometers from the facility, and David was moving before the doors finished opening, his weapon in his hands and his eyes fixed on the walls ahead. The rescue team formed up around him without needing instructions. Veterans and civilians and people From every walk of human life, united by a single purpose, they moved through the city streets, and the Kethrani came to stop them. David had never fought the aliens hand-to-hand before, and he quickly learned why they were so feared. They were faster than their size suggested, and their armored skin turned aside most weapons. Their claws could tear through body armor like paper, but humans had something the Kethrani did not understand. They had something to fight for, and when a Kethrani warrior killed one human, two more stepped forward to take their place. When a soldier fell wounded, their comrades dragged them to safety, while others provided covering fire. When the enemy pushed them back, they regrouped and pushed forward again. Dr. Elizabeth Park worked in the middle of the formation with a medical kit strapped to her back, pulling wounded fighters out of the line and patching them up just enough to keep fighting. She had saved 17 lives already, and she would save more before this day was done. The fortress walls loomed ahead, and the Kethrani defenders made their final stand in the courtyard. Before the main entrance, there were hundreds of them. Massive warriors in full battle armor with weapons that could vaporize a human with a single shot. David did not slow down. The human assault hit the Kethrani line, and for a few terrible moments, it was pure chaos. Bodies falling on both sides, blood from two species mixing in the dirt. Screams and roars, and the sound of weapons fire echoing off the fortress walls. David took a claw strike across his chest that would have killed him if not for his armor, and he responded by shoving his weapon into the gap between the Kethrani's neck plates and pulling the trigger. The alien fell, and David kept moving because he could not stop. Because stopping meant thinking about everything he had lost and everyone who had died to get him this far. The main door of the fortress was built to withstand military assault, but the humans had brought mining lasers and plasma cutters and equipment designed to slice through the hearts of asteroids. They cut through the door in 3 minutes and poured into the facility. Beyond, the corridors inside were a nightmare of close quarters combat where the Kethrani's size became a disadvantage. The humans flowing around them like water, striking from angles the aliens could not defend. David led the way deeper into the fortress, following the facility maps they had stolen from Kethrani computers, navigating by memory because there was no time to check directions. He killed 3 more Kethrani on the way and took wounds that he did not feel because his body had stopped registering pain somewhere in the last 19 days. The holding cells were in the lowest level of the facility. Rows of small cages where the captives from dozens of raids were kept like animals waiting to be sold. David ran past cell after cell, searching for one face among the hundreds of prisoners who stared at him with hope and fear and confusion. He found her in the last row. Maya was curled up in the corner of her cell, her clothes torn and her face dirty, bruises visible on her arms where the Kethrani had been rough with her. But she was alive. She was alive, and when she heard his voice calling her name, she looked up and her eyes went wide. "Daddy?" David had the cell door open in seconds, cutting through the lock with a plasma torch. And then she was in his arms, and he was holding her so tight that he could feel her heart beating against his chest. "I am here, baby," he said. "I am here, and you are safe now." "I knew you would come," she whispered. "I told them you would come, and they laughed, but I knew. I will always come for you, always. Nothing in the universe will ever stop me." Around them, the fortress burned as the rescue teams freed the other captives, and the last Kethrani defenders fell above them. The battle in orbit was ending as the human fleet overwhelmed the remaining enemy ships, and across the galaxy, a species that had once been predators learned what it meant to be prey. The war lasted exactly 19 days from the first human ship crossing into Kethrani space to the moment the Kethrani High Council sent their surrender transmission. 19 Days to bring down a civilization that had terrorized the galaxy for 6,000 years. The Council's message was simple and desperate, offering unconditional surrender and asking only that the humans stop their advance before more. Kethrani World's Burn Colonel David Chun was not interested in surrender terms or political negotiations. Wanted only one thing, and he already had it. Maya sat beside him on the transport ship heading back to human space, wrapped in a blanket and holding his hand like she would never let go. He had not spoken much since the rescue, her young mind still processing the horrors she had witnessed. But she was alive, and she was safe, and that was enough. The diplomats could handle everything. Else Ambassador Catherine Shaw met with the Kethrani High Council in a chamber that had once been used to display trophies taken from conquered species. The trophies were gone now, removed by the humans who had occupied the capital city, and returned to whatever families could be found. Shaw sat across from the 5 members of the council and looked at their faces, seeing something she had never expected to see on Kethrani features: fear. "You wish to discuss terms," she said. The eldest council member, a massive warrior whose scales had gone gray with age, spoke in a voice that trembled slightly. "We surrender unconditionally. We will pay whatever reparations you demand. We will submit to whatever punishments you decree. We ask only that you spare our civilian population." Shaw shook her head slowly. "You misunderstand. We do not want your territory. We do not want your wealth. We do not want your submission. Then what do you want?" "We want every human captive currently held by any Kethrani clan anywhere in the galaxy returned safely to us within 30 days. The council members looked at each other in confusion. "That is all?" "No, we also want a law passed by your highest authority, written into your most sacred codes, stating that no Kethrani will ever take a human captive again. Not as slaves, not as pets, not as trophies, not for any reason. And if this law is broken?" Shaw's expression did not change, but something in her eyes made the council members lean back in their chairs. "Then we will return. And next time, we will not stop at your capital." The law was passed within the hour. The human fleet began dispersing the next day, ships peeling off and heading back to wherever they had come from, returning to the lives they had abandoned. When the call went out, Admiral Okonkwo took the Relentless back to the shipyard, where it would be decommissioned at last. Its final mission complete, the Chum brothers, or rather the 2 surviving Chum brothers, returned to their salvage operation in the Outer Rim, carrying with them the memory of Marcus, who had died opening the gap in the Kethrani defensive line. Elizabeth Park went back to her hospital and resumed saving lives. Though sometimes late at night, she would look at the stars and remember the lives she had saved on a battlefield far from home, the galaxy. Watch these humans scatter and return to their normal existence. With a mixture of awe and terror, Ambassador Zilveth of the Moravian Collective requested another private meeting with Ambassador Shaw, this time with a different question than before. How do we ensure that what happened to the Kethrani never happens to us? Shaw smiled, and it was a genuine smile this time, warm and friendly. That is the easiest question I have ever been asked. Please, enlighten me. Do not give us a reason. That is all. Do not threaten our children. Do not take our people. Do not make us feel that our families are in danger. And if we do these things, then you will find us to be the best friend you have ever had. We will trade with you fairly. We will share our technology. We will come to your aid if you are threatened. We will be loyal allies for as long as your species exists. Zilveth considered this for a long moment. And if we become your enemies? The warmth did not leave Shaw's face, but something else appeared there as well. Something ancient and patient and utterly implacable. Do not. The message spread through the galactic community in the months that followed. Passed from species to species, from world to world, from one end of known Space to the other humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the fastest or the smartest or the most technologically advanced. They were friendly and cooperative and preferred peace to war, but if you threatened their children, you would face something that no amount of strength or speed or technology could defeat. You would face a species that did not know how to give up. You would face a species that did not count the cost. You would face parents 20 years later. Maya Chun stood before a class of young diplomats from a dozen different species, teaching them the same lesson her father had taught the Kethrani. My father walked through fire for me, she told them. He crossed the galaxy and fought a war and burned a civilization to the ground. And he did it without hesitation, because that is what humans do for their children. Is it true that no species has attacked a human colony since then? One of the students asked. Maya nodded. In 20 years, there has not been a single raid. Not a single attack. Not a single human child taken. The Kethrani learned their lesson, and they made sure everyone else learned it too. What lesson was that? Maya walked to the window and looked out at the stars. The same stars her father had crossed to find her. The same stars that humans had filled with fire to bring her home. That we are not scary because of what we can do. She turned back to face her students. We are scary because of what we will do. For family, there is nothing we will not sacrifice. There is no distance we will not cross. There is no enemy we will not face. Does that not make you dangerous? Maya smiled, and it was the same smile her father wore when he found her in that cell. The smile of someone who had walked through hell and come out the other side still holding on to what mattered most. Very dangerous, she admitted, but only to those who give us a reason to be. To everyone else, we are just humans, friendly and curious and eager to make new friends. The safest neighbors you could ever ask for. She paused and let the silence stretch for a moment. Just do not touch our children. That is all we ask. Respect our families, and we will respect yours. Threaten them, and you will learn what the Kethrani learned. What is that? Maya's smile faded into something harder. Something that had been passed down from generation to generation since the first human parent held their first human child. That some species forgive, and humans do not. Not when it comes to our children. Never when it comes to our children.